Have you ever introduced a villain meant to last a whole campaign, only for them to get bodied in like 5 minutes and for your players to not care? Like, imagine this. You hype them up, you drop their music, and you even gave them a theme like the Undertaker. And your players, they seemed interested at first, but now they're just not. They stop showing up to sessions. When they do show up to sessions, they're secretly scrolling TikTok. And wait, a player's asleep? Again? Oh my god. Is that you? Yeah. After being inspired by the Nemesis system from Shadow of War and making my very own system I called the Rising Rivals and Ascending Ally system, I haven't really had that problem again. Look, I'm not great at storytelling, but what I am good at is focusing on making stuff people actually care about. This is a follow-up video because the last video I posted, well, it exploded, and the biggest question I got was, but Sensei, how do we use allies without ruining our games? So today I'm revealing exactly how I handled that, plus betrayals, fortress sieges, and villain weaknesses. And I'm gonna do that through the story of a little goblin grunt who became my greatest villain ever, Lucky Fang. And I'll prove to you it works by telling you exactly how my singular experience and mechanics are bound to give you the exact same result. Except I'm not. See, this video series is me just telling you what I did and how I ran things. Look, a lot of YouTubers like to tell you how to run this and that this is the best way to do XYZ or ultimate dungeon master tip. But the thing is, I'm not the DM of your group. I'm just a dude who likes D&D, anime, and video games. You know your group best. So if there's something you like, steal it like Eddie Guerrero and tell no one. If there's something you don't like or you're not a fan of, don't do it and come up with your own way.
I'm gonna do my own thing.
Because, you see, my name is Sensei Suplex. I'm a certified dumbass, but I'm also a professional dungeon master who, over the past 7 years, ran about 4 games of weekly D&D for a living. And I used to run for about 36 people a week a couple of years back. See, the thing is, I want to help more people experience the life-changing game that is Dungeons & Dragons and TTRPGs in general. I'm building a giant MMORPG universe where players like you can drop into high-stakes, story-connected sessions without scheduling headaches and dozens of DMs wanting players again just like you. Let me tell you how I got my players to be screaming like this when I made my craziest villain yet.
No.
Oh no.
With
Lucky Fang!
That was cool.
Okay, look, creating memorable and engaging villains requires more than just power and intimidation. Villains need clear and exploitable weaknesses, something players can strategize around and emotionally invest in. Here's the thing, the more I explored the Nemesis system from Shadow of War, the clearer it became that my rivals, they kind of lacked defined weaknesses. They were mechanically powerful, but my players had difficulty strategizing against these foes because there weren't obvious weaknesses to exploit. And initially, I struggled with maintaining cohesion between a villain's personality and their mechanical traits. And creating so many rivals at once meant personalities began to blend and their strengths overshadowed any identifiable flaws. However, with this rival system, Lucky Fang became one of my most notorious and genuinely hated villains in just 1 month. Y'all wanted examples on how I run this, so you're getting examples. Initially, Lucky Fang was just a regular goblin, but when a player used an enchantment spell to trick him into believing his ally was about to betray him, Lucky Fang panicked and killed him first. Soon after, he killed a monk, stole the monk's lucky feet, but was badly burned and killed by burning hands from behind while fleeing. I used these events to shape Lucky Fang's personality and mechanics. He became paranoid and hypervigilant. So I made it where attacks from behind had advantage, while other attacks had disadvantage. And yes, I gave my villain vulnerability to backshots, but hey, that's not the point. It's not like that. Anyways, as Lucky Fang grew stronger, his paranoia and cruelty intensified. He went from being the goblin whose luck protected his allies to a ruthless killer who eliminated anyone he considered unlucky. For those favoring a rules light approach, my advice to you is straightforward. Overemphasize your villain's personality traits through consistent roleplay. Have minions mention their quirks often in and outside of combat. For my mechanically inclined DMs, directly tie a villain's flaw to a previous death or significant event. If an enemy died by fire previously, make fire their vulnerability. Alternatively, you could reverse this logic and transform what killed them previously into their newfound strength, granting them resistance and making the opposite their weakness. This is how Shadow of War orcs actually use the adapt feature. This method ensured my villains felt unique, memorable, and directly connected to players' actions, giving them that bit of agency. So let me tell you this, what's scarier than facing one powerful villain? Well, facing multiple at once. When villains decide to team up in a hierarchy, encounters quickly escalated into just chaotic battles. And you might think more villains equals more fun, more challenge, but in practice, it's often just more frustrating for players and DMs alike. When multiple rivals appeared together, balancing these encounters became a nightmare. Balancing multiple strong enemies simultaneously was overwhelming and unfair, forcing awkward improvisation from my part. I awkwardly kind of like held back villains like Morvath the Ashbinder, Lucky Fang's superior, who ended up just kind of like aura farming on the stairs like Piccolo from Dragon Ball Z, to not have him join the encounter and just wipe the floor with everybody. Players eventually, they bypassed him, and it forced a clumsy response and dragged him into the combat, and overall, it just sucked, dude. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not gonna be like every YouTuber and just lie to you and say to do these things and leave out the fact that I've never tried this out myself. So to be completely honest, I never got a chance to implement this at the time, and I beat myself up about it all the time. But here's what I would do if given the chance to provide a more strategic and immersive approach that I'm confident would dramatically improve combat, realism, and player agency. Here's a rules light approach. Clearly define villain hierarchies. Lower ranked villains can reveal info about higher ups to pace threats naturally. This naturally staggers powerful enemies' appearances and avoids overwhelming players, and adds depth through narrative reveals. Ultimately, leverage the hierarchy system effectively by giving rivals real goals dictated by their superiors. Players then become the unpredictable element disrupting the villain's plans. Think about it this way: the machine will operate with or without them. It's the player's role to break it down.
I'm the machine!
For a mechanical approach, first, do exactly what the rules light people are doing, and on top of that, assign each rival clear and independent objectives beyond simply kill the players. For instance, Morvath could have been completing a necromantic ritual at the altar. Lucky Fang could have been specifically assigned to player elimination duty. We could have had a third rival here that might have focused on protecting Morvath or escaping with critical intel or something like that. The point is that rivals can act logically according to their goals, giving players clear strategic choices about whom to prioritize. Players then can choose how to succeed or decide which rival's plan they'll allow to succeed if they can't handle them all. So after this, Lucky Fang, he was getting pretty strong. The players, they had to think of something. So here's what they did. They started recruiting NPCs. But let me ask you this. Have you ever had players recruit so many NPC allies that running combat felt like managing a small army rather than a D&D game? Allies, look, they can be incredible additions, but when allies overshadow your player characters or bog down combat, you've got a real problem. I mentioned allies briefly last video, but you wanted more details, so let's finally unpack it. When my players began actively recruiting NPC allies, especially after befriending a group of pixies, the complexity and sheer number of NPCs in play, it exploded. What started as a fun and immersive addition quickly turned into an overwhelming juggling act. Allies were weaker individually than player characters, sure, but the quantity quickly became unmanageable. Combat slowed, and my attention was being spread thin, and eventually the game became less about the players' characters and more about their entourage. Something needed to change. But my biggest struggle was finding a balance between simplicity and meaningful contribution from allies. I wanted NPC allies to feel impactful and narratively significant, but I couldn't let them overshadow the player characters or slow down gameplay. So I settled on two distinct methods based on the style of the DM. For rules light DMs, I decided to do this. Use narrative focused boons. Rather than giving allies full stat blocks, just assign them thematic benefits based on their personalities or professions outside of combat, rather than always recruiting them to combat itself. So, for example, a merchant may give discounts, spies or rogues may offer intel, blacksmiths may offer extra gear. So, by focusing on narrative and thematic boons, these allies contribute meaningfully without ever needing to directly enter combat or slow gameplay down. So, in order to figure out what your ally's boon is, ask the ally.
Spartans! What is your profession?
Okay, maybe not all that, but for mechanically inclined DMs, here's what you're gonna do. Use hero actions. They function similarly to lair actions, but for the good guys. So instead of placing ally tokens on the battlefield and running them directly, assign each ally, or a group of allies, a set of thematic hero actions that trigger on a fixed initiative count. So usually initiative 20 or their own rolled initiative. Here's exactly how I ran it. Allies don't have tokens on the battlefield. I would narratively describe them fighting alongside the players without taking up tactical space. You can have their token on the battlefield to let them get attacked. I just didn't though. You can do what you want. On an ally initiative or hero action initiative, players collectively decide between a few preset actions their ally can perform. My personal go-tos are, allies provide all PCs advantage on their next attack roll this round. Allies can grant temporary HP to the party. This is useful if your group lacks healers. Allies can impose disadvantage on one enemy's attacks or deal minor AoE damage. Allies allow PCs to move without provoking attacks of opportunity. This is perfect for positioning. Or allies deal a small amount of single target damage to help finish off those weakened foes. The thing is that you choose 2, you choose 3, whatever, that's it, but don't choose any more. If you have multiple allies, combine their actions into one single initiative count. It's efficient and it's engaging. This is how Baldur's Gate 3 did it, but I did it first, and I'm totally not upset or anything, so to compensate me, you can listen to my sponsor. This video is brought to you by Like the Damn Video. Hey, you, yeah, you. You ever want that funny little wacky guy of a YouTuber you really like to hit it big, to do collaborations with like a Bria Iyengar or B. Dave Walters? Well, with our completely free sponsor, Like the Damn Video, you too can cause that wacky little guy to blow up in popularity. So, you know, go ahead. Thanks again to our sponsor. We'll be right back after the break. All right, back to the breakdown. Sometimes villains become too powerful for direct combat. To defeat a rival like Lucky Fang, someone entrenched with an entire army, players need strategies. You see, players didn't know what weaknesses my villains had, so they struggled. Players had no immediate way to gain that kind of tactical information on rivals, and on top of that, players were recruiting way too many allies. To solve the intelligence problem, my players creatively generated their own solution right when I needed it. Meet Glub, a goblin NPC turned spy who, funny enough, originated from the same encounter as Lucky Fang was born from. Glub was just a goblin, but after the interrogations, players saw his potential. Players devised a brilliant narrative solution, help him infiltrate Lucky Fang's ranks, and afterwards, he'd provide narrative intel and mechanical weaknesses, like Lucky Fang's fire vulnerability. So for rules like DMs, here's what you can do. Use spies as narrative vehicles to explain villain activities, progress, and general intel without direct rival confrontations. For mechanically inclined DMs, do everything the rules light DMs are doing, but also employ spies mechanically to uncover explicit rival weaknesses, like in the example I mentioned with Glub. And in fact, this is exactly how Shadow of War did it with Orc Worms. Also, this is important. Weaknesses, they don't need to exist from the start. Rivals can develop them naturally, becoming known through espionage over time, so you don't have to have a full villain fleshed out immediately. But I wasn't done. I introduced narrative betrayal mechanics. But the thing is that people asked why I didn't use Shadow of War's baked-in betrayal mechanics, and, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe because the reason why orcs are recruited is because they are literally broken down mentally after beating the out of them, forced to see God, and then subjugated against their will to kill other orcs. The orcs, mind you, that literally come from the dirt and mud, who rise from the ground. They aren't born, they're put through the Sauron sludge factory. The point is that my players recruited their allies through logic and social interaction. Both parties mutually benefited, so betrayals require deeper narrative justification besides, you know what, screw it, I rolled a dice and they're gonna betray you and try to kill you now. So here's what I did. I established a plotline where an unknown allied NPC betrayed players by leaking critical information, ultimately causing the death of another beloved ally, because they didn't really like each other. It had nothing to do with the PCs, but it affected them. The campaign then began to feel like an interconnected war zone, with players battling external enemies and internal treachery simultaneously. So, quick couple of takeaways. Emphasize narrative realism. NPC betrayal should logically emerge from motivations and circumstance rather than randomness, in my opinion. It's D&D, not a video game. Heighten player tension and strategic considerations by making recruitment meaningful but also risky. For betrayal, use it sparingly but decisively, making its occurrence memorable and impactful. In Shadow of War, it happens often. In D&D, you can do this though, but it's only at most like twice in a campaign. But now, here we are. Massive cinematic D&D wars. They sound amazing, right? But they can quickly turn into literal nightmares. So here's how I managed Lucky Fang's climactic siege. You see, my problem was straightforward, but it was intimidating. See, I run in Project Aurora, the thing I mentioned earlier, so I need to deliver an epic war across four interconnected sessions within a single week. Each group's actions influence the others, intensifying the complexity and requiring a lot of coordination. But I made it work. Players had specific objectives. Group 1, they had to prevent reinforcements from reaching Lucky Fang. Group 2 would assault Lucky Fang's headquarters directly. Group 3 would secure ships and resources for the siege. And Group 4, they would capitalize on the chaos while no one was sort of paying attention to them to retrieve the crucial MacGuffin that would be useful and relevant for the entire campaign later. The point is that the scope was immense. The stakes were high, and conventional D&D combat rules were simply too cumbersome for such a scale. Initially, running large-scale battles caused chaos, and NPC management overshadowed players like I was mentioning before, and the pacing, it slowed horrendously. To simplify and enhance the siege, I employed hero actions and minion mechanics, popularized by Matt Colville. Minion mechanics, if you don't know, it's basically you use your standard enemy stat blocks, but the difference is that they only have 1 HP. But if they're hit, or they fail a saving throw, they're instantly defeated. Thanks, Matt Colville. Once I was kind of running all this, the thing that I realized was that the preparation for the siege itself was even more essential than the battles themselves. The players probably enjoyed the preparation more than the battle. Here's why. You see, my players were deeply invested time into planning tactics, strategizing troop movements, exploiting weaknesses, and managing resources. This process created a powerful narrative tension and meaningful strategic depth. So here's my takeaway for you rules light DMs. Focus heavily on narrative preparation session and highlight emotional stakes and relationships. Have your NPCs react to the fact that they're pretty much in the midst of a war and how that's sort of affecting them. But in combat, run the focus battles centered on the players and the big rivals, no one else. Allies can handle minor foes in the background. You want to keep the players in the spotlight. Advice from the mechanical DMs, same thing, but also allow players to strategically deploy allies on assassination or sabotage missions. For this, here's what you're going to do. You're going to define key details like enemy location, backup troops, and player provided advantages. So spells, equipments, whatever. And then you're going to play out the encounter by literally rolling with their stats. Or alternatively, if you don't got time, narratively decide the outcomes quickly or simulate them if your prep allows. Both approaches enhance the depth. In my campaign, players deeply enjoyed the boss encounters precisely because their preparation directly impacted each group's success. And this war, it ended memorably. You remember that character who screamed Lucky Fang in the beginning? Well, thanks to his planning, along with 23 other players planning, his character landed the final blow on Lucky Fang. The victory became legendary, strengthening player bonds and enriching the entire campaign, exciting them for the future. So, the Rising Rival system didn't just create unforgettable villains, it forged beloved allies players called their children, literally. It created genuine investment and my players loved every second of it. Well, except for the part where they were dying, but that's besides the point. But if you have more questions about Rising Rivals, drop a comment below. I might make a part 3 if you guys ask for it, or part 4. I don't know, this video is long, so I don't know what I did, but I'm also developing a new system combining State of Decay 2 and The Sims and letting you play sessions as villains to create future rivals. This is going to be perfect for canceled session days. So if you want to hear more about this system, comment rivals below, or if you just want more tips. But with Rising Rivals, you'll craft enemies your players will never forgive, but you're also going to make ones they're never going to forget either.